Robert Whittaker has stepped in to defend Khamzat Chimaev and Islam Makhachev after both received backlash from fans who labeled their recent title-winning performances as boring. Despite dominating their championship fights from start to finish, the lack of a stoppage led segments of the MMA community to criticize the wins as underwhelming. On the latest episode of his podcast, Whittaker pushed back strongly against that narrative, emphasizing that fans often misunderstand what they are watching at the highest level of mixed martial art. Whittaker explained that people have no idea how impressive it truly is to dominate another world-class fighter for almost 25 minutes. According to him, when an athlete is facing champions or elite contenders who are technically sound, physically conditioned, and mentally prepared for every scenario, shutting them down everywhere for round after round is an extraordinary achievement. He added that consistently neutralizing a world-class opponent in grappling, striking exchanges, scrambles, and control positions for an entire fight requires a mastery that very few fighters in history have ever accomplished. Whittaker pointed out that the reason fans don't appreciate it is because they don't understand the level of difficulty or the level of skill involved in neutralizing someone who is also among the best in the world. He continued by saying that the ability to hold down and control a champion or a top 5 fighter in every phase of combat is extremely rare, and that performances like those of Chimaev and Makhachev should be respected rather than criticized. In his view, the UFC has not seen that kind of technical dominance often across its history, and fans should recognize that what they are witnessing is the highest level of grappling and positional control in the sport. Whittaker even described these fights as valuable learning material, suggesting that anyone studying mixed martial arts could use them as a tutorial to analyze the fine details. Regarding what's next, Chimaev is expected to return after April of 2026 in a major middleweight showdown against Nassourdine Imavov. Islam Makhachev, now the first Russian 2-division UFC champion, is currently awaiting confirmation of his next opponent. The possibilities include featherweight champion Ilia Topuria or top welterweight contenders such as Ian Garry or Kamaru Usman, depending on how the divisions develop. Whittaker concluded humorously by pointing out that if someone could control another person for 25 minutes in a street fight, the fight is already decided. Complete control equals complete victory. In a recent interview with a Russian outlet, Islam Makhachev discussed the possibility of moving back down to lightweight, a potential super fight with Ilia Topuria, and who he believes is truly next in line for a welterweight title shot. Makhachev explained that a fight with Topuria at 155 pounds is highly unlikely unless the UFC makes a massive financial and promotional offer. He stated that he is no longer a young fighter and every weight cut affects his body more than before. Dropping to lightweight is not the same process it once was, and if the UFC wants him to drain himself again, they need to give him something significant in return. Otherwise, he plans to remain at 170 pounds where he now feels physically stronger and healthier. When asked about his next welterweight opponent, Makhachev said that the division is starting to take shape and that a decision from the UFC is close. According to him, there are currently 3 or 4 legitimate contenders under discussion, and he expects the UFC to finalize the matchup within the next 2 weeks. Makhachev expressed no preference and stated that whoever earns the opportunity will get the fight. Makhachev also reacted to Ian Garry's performance at UFC Qatar. He said he was not surprised by Garry's showing, because he already knew what type of fighter Garry is and what he brings to the table. However, if Garry's performance impressed the UFC and if the promotion sees him as a marketable challenger, Makhachev believes that the UFC might select him next. He emphasized that decisions at the championship level often come down to timing and business as much as merit. He then addressed the possibility of facing Shavkat Rakhmonov. Makhachev acknowledged that Rakhmonov is a dangerous fighter but pointed out that he has been inactive for more than a year due to injury. Makhachev explained that it is difficult to justify a title shot for someone who has been sidelined for so long, especially when other contenders have been active. Still, he made it clear that if Rakhmonov recovers and the UFC chooses him as the challenger, he has no issue accepting that matchup. Overall, Makhachev reinforced that he is focused on defending his welterweight title and competing only in high-stakes fights that make sense physically, competitively, and financially. He remains open to all contenders as long as the UFC finalizes the right opponent. Dana White has officially reacted to the altercation between Khamzat Chimaev and Ian Garry at UFC Qatar after the unexpected incident at the Fighter Hotel became the biggest headline of the week. What initially appeared on camera to be a friendly interaction escalated into a real physical confrontation within seconds. According to witnesses, Ian Garry approached Chimaev from behind and grabbed him on the back in what looked like an overly playful greeting. The touch was noticeably more physical than the situation called for. Chimaev, who is known for having little patience for disrespect or unexpected physical contact, did not appreciate it. As Garry walked past him, Chimaev slapped him on the back, also in a way that on the surface came across playful but had an aggressive edge. Garry immediately turned around, words were exchanged, and the two began confronting each other face to face. Chimaev pushed Garry and told him he would destroy him. Security stepped in instantly and separated them before the situation could get any worse. Dana White later addressed the incident publicly and said that UFC staff and matchmakers are becoming increasingly frustrated with repeated hotel hallway confrontations. He emphasized that these episodes have been happening card after card, and Chimaev has been at the center of far too many of them. According to White, beyond what the public saw on video, there was also a separate backstage issue that has not yet been revealed. He did not go into detail but strongly implied that the situation behind the scenes was much more chaotic than fans realize. White stated that the matchmakers are not fans of these recurring issues and that their patience is wearing thin for various reasons. Ian Garry, meanwhile, is coming off the biggest victory of his career, defeating Belal Muhammad, and he has been using every interview opportunity to call out Islam Makhachev for a welterweight title fight. Garry believes that with recent wins over top contenders, including Belal and Vicente Luque, he has earned the right to demand the next shot at the title. He is fully aware that stirring attention, headlines, and drama increases his chances of getting the opportunity he wants. Dana White concluded by admitting that the UFC tried to prevent these types of situations but acknowledged that they didn't do a good job in this case. He reiterated that these incidents cannot continue, especially during fight week, when emotions and adrenaline are already high. Max Holloway has finally explained why he is not rushing to be part of the historic White House UFC event, even though fighters across divisions have openly campaigned to secure a spot on the card. While Holloway acknowledges that the idea is monumental for the sport and the global spotlight would be enormous, he highlighted that one factor matters more than anything else to him: his family. Since the event is expected to allow only around 5,000 spectators on site, Holloway stated that his family likely would not receive seats. For him, that is an emotional deal-breaker. He added that he has spent years fighting at the highest level with his family present cage-side, and the thought of participating in such a historic moment without them does not sit right with him. However, he made it clear that if the UFC wants him on the card, he will accept the fight out of respect for the sport and the significance of the event. He clarified that he is simply not obsessed with the idea the way many fighters appear to be, and he refuses to prioritize hype over family. Fresh off his huge victory over Dustin Poirier, Holloway is already targeting a rematch with Charles Oliveira. If that fight gets booked, the winner will be positioned directly back into the lightweight title conversation. Holloway believes the timing makes perfect sense for both athletes, and the stakes would be extremely high. Meanwhile, on the championship side of the lightweight division, things are quickly becoming interesting. A matchup between Ilia Topuria and Arman Tsarukyan suddenly appears more realistic than it did just a few weeks ago. Tsarukyan picked up another major win recently, and if Topuria returns in February as many expect, Tsarukyan is emerging as the clear #1 contender. Fans have already begun campaigning for that fight online, and the timing lines up perfectly for both sides. Holloway also reflected on his status as the only American holding a championship within the UFC, even though his title is the BMF belt rather than a traditional divisional championship. He joked that this gives him high odds of being placed on the White House card, but he repeated that attending such a historic moment without his family would be extremely difficult. For now, Holloway's focus is on healing his current injury and securing his next fight early in the year, ideally around March or April. If the UFC decides to hold him until June to match the White House timeline, he said the wait would be long, considering he last fought Poirier in June of the previous year.